The ripple effects of losing a loved one to suicide can often spread wider, further, and last for much longer than you might think. It's really clear from listening to those of you who we talk to for this series, the legacy of suicide is complicated and individual. Several people in the same family grieving the same loved one can have very different memories and process that grief in a very different way, particularly if they're from different generations, which is why I really wanted to talk to Orlagh McIver when she got in touch. Orlagh was just 9 when she found out about her cousin Callum's death to suicide. She's now 16, and she wrote about losing Callum for her Nat 5 English qualification.
I got out of the car and was quickly ushered past the cloud of people outside. I was confused. Why was nobody going about their day-to-day life? Something isn't right. Flushed faces all round. Why are they all behaving like they are part of a military operation? I rushed inside and went to play with my little cousin. I instinctively knew it was time to stay out of the way. My mum asked me to come and sit with her on the sofa, my entire family towering over us like we were the main characters in a movie. "Orlagh, your cousin Callum has passed away. He's dead," said Mum. Those words pierced the silence in the room. It was as if time had stopped. Her words echoed through different parts of my mind, trying to find their way out of the maze, but they didn't. "Oh," I whispered. How was a 9-year-old supposed to feel? I didn't know what to say or think. I was emotionless at the time. Whilst I was stuck in my own thoughts, everyone around me crumbled down in sadness, crying, deafening wailing, some pacing the floor, leaving the room. I thought I had to be like them. Am I supposed to cry? I'm not sure how long it took, but when it sunk in, I felt sad. Really, really sad. My mind couldn't understand what had happened to Callum, but I knew I'd never ever see him again.
I'm Penny Stewart, and for this episode of Speaking of Suicide, I'm talking to Orlagh, who we just heard reading that, and her mum Sarah is also with us. We're going to talk about that day when you found out about Callum in just a moment. Before we do, if you're listening to this and you need support, you'll find all the details for Mikey's Line in the show notes, and we'll give out more details at the end of the episode. Orlagh, let me take you back to that day if I can. What do you remember about it? We've heard a bit of it there, but in your mind, as you go back to it, what are the key things that maybe jump out?
I remember everything not being quite normal. My dad was at home. I don't remember if it was just because he was at home and he had been off work, or if he hadn't been home that morning and had come home. And I knew my mum had been out that day, so when I came home and my mum wasn't here, it wasn't a shock to me that she wasn't here. And I just remember my dad, he wasn't sat down, he was kind of pacing around the living room. And I came in and I was excited, I had had a good day at school. And he was kind of like, "No, I don't have time, we need to go, we need to get on the bus." And so we did. I didn't ask, I just kind of said, okay, and I went with my dad. We got off at my cousin's boyfriend's work and got in his car, and nothing was really said, and we just kind of went. And then I remember showing up at my cousin's house and everyone was there, and I just was kind of like, wow, something isn't right. There's something going on. But still, I just didn't really know. I was just confused. Didn't know what was happening and why I was there, that kind of thing.
Sarah, I expect you've got a different set of difficult memories of that day. What do you most remember?
I had my mum at the hospital for an appointment, and we actually met Katie, Callum's sister. She was working and she was leaving the hospital. She was rushing out of the hospital, and she had kind of said, we're not getting an answer from Callum, that kind of thing. So I didn't say anything to my mum, just left it at that. But while mum was in for her appointment, I got a call in the waiting room. And from then, it was just a kind of blur. I remember breaking down in the waiting room and the nurses taking me off to a side room. But yeah, after that, I can't even remember how I got from the hospital to my niece's house. Did I drive, or did I get a lift? I'm not even 100% certain.
I think he drove.
Did I?
Because the car was there.
I only know about Orla getting the bus and then meeting my niece's partner because of your folio. I hadn't, until I read it, I was like, yeah, that's right. I didn't know how they just arrived there because I had the car. It's quite interesting how you're able to fill in some of the little gaps that are missing.
It sounds from hearing Orla's side of it and your side of it that everybody gathered together. You've got a big family, and the instinct was to all gather. But I wondered whether it was a conscious decision to include 9-year-old Orla in that gathering, to bring her to the place where people were clearly upset and shocked and all these things. How do you reflect on that decision now? Was it a conscious decision?
It wasn't a decision at all. It was just swept along. I knew my niece's little girl would be there. She was just a baby at the time. So I guess the kind of hope was you did go and play with her, didn't you? There was no premeditated thoughts at all. Us all gathering together, we had also lost my dad to suicide. So it was almost like a deja vu. It was, the urn came out of the loft. Everybody was together. It was almost, is this really happening?
Gosh, I wasn't aware of that. So it must have brought up all kinds of memories from the past.
Yeah.
How difficult, even more difficult. Orla, you write very eloquently about how confusing it was for your 9-year-old self. What was confusing you? What can you remember the kind of things that were going through your mind? Because I think it's really interesting to try and see this through the eyes of a child as well as through your mum's eyes.
I don't know. I kind of, obviously I was, conscious of time of year and stuff because I was old enough to, understand that. And so I think because I knew it wasn't anybody's birthday, I was quite good with like birthdays and stuff and remembering. So I knew it wasn't someone's birthday, it wasn't Christmas, it wasn't, it wasn't an event. Obviously we saw each other, outside of birthdays and Christmas and whatever, but it was never really everyone. That was one of the most confusing things, kind of, there's nothing going on, so why is everybody here? And I kind of knew at the time most of my family were working or had a job, and so it was a Monday, and so for all of them to be there, I was kind of like, well, why are they not at work? And I kind of understood that it wasn't easy for people to just, leave work and go and do what they had to do. So I just think the whole thing of everyone being there on a weekday just really kind of made me think something's not right and just confused me a bit.
So you learned, by the sound of it, quite quickly from Sarah, your mum here, that Callum had died. But did you know at that point that he'd taken his life? What did you understand about what had taken place?
I didn't know that he had taken his own life. My mum only had told me that he'd passed away. And at 9 years old, I understood what that meant. We had a bunny rabbit when I was little, and I kind of slowly they helped me understand, what had happened to the bunny rabbit because, the bunny rabbit passed away. So they were quite good at making sure I understood that type of thing. So when my mum had said to me, he's passed away, I understood, that was final, he's not coming back. But I didn't know that he had taken his own life. I think even if I did, I wouldn't have understood what it was. So at that moment, it didn't really make a difference whether I did or not. But it was quite difficult for me to kind of understand what that meant, because to me, Callum was young. He wasn't visibly unwell to me. He seemed happy, like he was healthy. So I just kind of didn't understand, because I just thought that, you got old and you passed away with old age, or you could get really ill and you would pass away. So I didn't really understand how it had happened to him.
Although I didn't know much of what was going on, I knew that she had to be told immediately, because I just didn't want to confuse her even more, of why people were so upset, and it was just a case of, she needs told. Orla was quite switched on from a very early age, so it wouldn't have taken very long. I'm pretty sure you were probably already realising it was something not so good that had happened, so it was important that I had told her. I didn't know what the reaction was going to be, and again, reading Orla's folio, it was just a simple, oh, and that was all. There was nothing else. But it was important to get it to you that's what had happened.
It must be very difficult to be managing your own emotions and response to Callum's death, along with managing to some extent or being aware of Orla's response. Was that something you were conscious of, thinking, I'm trying to understand me and her and everyone else's part in all this, because the whole family were gathered there?
Yeah, in the immediate, you did just go and then play with her little cousin. Usually she vanished, she stayed out of the way, kind of thing. And in the weeks that followed, we were blessed to an extent that she understood that there would be a post-mortem and toxology. You didn't know what that meant, but it gave me a bit of a gap to try and figure out, how and when we were going to touch the subject, which in Orla's style she did herself.
We're going to come back to that, because I do want to hear about that, and I think that's very important. But I'd like to get a bit more of a sense of Callum, and how you remember Callum before that dreadful day, because he was a big cousin, wasn't he? He was quite a bit older than you. So what kind of a relationship did you have, and what do you remember of Callum?
Well, I would say with Callum and his mum and dad and his sister, I spent a lot of my time down there, especially when I was younger. I used to go and have sleepovers at their house all the time with Katie, and I would say I spent quite a lot of time down there, even with my mum and dad and stuff. I feel like I don't remember as much as I would like to, because I think when it happened, I didn't really think about, the fact that I kind of needed to savor the good memories. So there's bits missing, but I just remember him as always being happy, funny. I remember we used to have macaroni a lot. My auntie and uncle used to make us macaroni all the time. And he never called it macaroni. It was always macaroni or something, different. It was never macaroni. I remember spending quite a lot of time in his room. And however it happened, he'd figured out that I didn't like getting a massage on my shoulders, because it just tickled. So I remember spending a lot of time, wriggling around his floor, giggling, because he knew it tickled me. So he would do it, and then I'd be laughing, rolling around the floor. I remember him being really good at football. We used to play football in the garden a lot, and not even just playing football, the skill side of it as well. I remember him being really good, but overall I just remember him being really happy. I remember he loved cars a lot, his shoes. I always used to go around in his shoes and stuff, but overall just really happy and cheerful and joyful.
And Sarah, how do you remember Callum?
He was premature, so I can remember as a teenager being really scared of him, like to touch him, and because he was so precious and tiny. And growing up, he was always just such a gentle, gentle soul. I used to poke a lot of fun at him. I love nothing more than a giggle. And he used to give me this look as an adult that he's like, oh, you know, she's going to have some capers today. But just gentle, caring. You know, he would ask how you are. Yeah, just as we would say between ourselves, he was just a darling. You know, you couldn't even, there wasn't a bad bone in his body. You couldn't say that, oh, he was a rogue or he was a rascal, or, because he just wasn't. He was, yeah, he was practically perfect.
There had been, I'm assuming, some mental health issues in the family if you'd lost your own dad to suicide. But had you ever had any concerns regarding your nephew, Callum?
No, Dad's situation was different. Dad was an alcoholic and battled demons pretty much all his life. It was still unexpected with Dad, but with Callum, even now, tomorrow is 7 years. It's the anniversary tomorrow. And even now, it's just unfathomable, if that's the word. Really difficult to wrap your head around. There was nothing. Ups and downs, I would suppose, that you would hear my sister talking about, but nothing that you would go, that's really concerning, or, there's something going on here. Nothing at all. In fact, he was probably at the best. He had got a house and he had just gutted it all, hadn't he? We went up for a tour and he was saying how he was looking forward to having us all up for a barbecue, and yeah, nothing at all.
If you don't mind me asking, what age were you when you lost your dad?
Orlagh was 2, you were just 2, so I would have been about 32, yeah.
So you weren't a child like Orlagh was when you lost Callum?
No.
I suppose, though, there you've got two quite different experiences of someone taking their life. Very sadly, you've got, the comparison there. Was the grief and shock of Callum different?
Massively, massively different. I was floored after my dad. I still haven't read sympathy cards. There was a lot of aggravation around my dad's circumstances, and I honestly thought that was the worst thing I could ever face in my whole life. And I had only just, so there was a 7-year gap, I had only just opened the case of my dad's belongings that I had taken from the house, not long before Callum took his own life. But I can't even put into words. I tell you, one way that I was that, if you've got children and they hurt themselves, as a parent, or just, if you know children, you can tell how sore the incident is because of how long they hold their breath. It's like living in that breath. So it just goes on and on and on. And that is honestly how I felt after Callum. I spent 3 months in the shed smoking, and I didn't smoke. Just trying to make some kind of sense of it. And I know after suicide, it's like you've been reborn, and I did feel like that with Dad. It was a new life now. But with Callum, it was, It's an indescribable feeling.
Just so I can understand it, what do you mean by being reborn after suicide?
Because there's not a single solitary thing in life that is the same anymore. Absolutely every single thing in life changed. My empathy has grown tenfold. I threw myself into education after Callum to get onto child bereavement UK courses so that I could support the kids, my sister. I did teens, children, their families, because I had the knowledge personally, but I didn't have skilled knowledge with it. I mean, I did have the professional skills, I suppose, but, you know, and I just wanted to back it up so that I was able to help.
Although let's come back to when you did learn that your cousin Callum had actually taken his own life. What do you remember of that? How did that come about? Because that can't have been an easy conversation at all.
Well, I remember thinking, that stuff like that didn't happen when I had returned to school the following day, albeit late. I arrived at kind of lunchtime, and I remember I was standing at the back of the queue because I had arrived late, so I was at the end of the queue, and one of the boys went out of his way to come out of the queue and say to me, "Oh, your cousin Callum stabbed himself." And I didn't even say anything, I don't think. I think I just stood there and looked at him. And another boy in the year above me, who's also related to Callum, had said, come and kind of grabbed him and said, "Look, listen, leave her alone, don't say that." And kind of put him back in his place in the queue and said, "Stop it, that's not okay." And I kind of thought, I didn't say anything, but I was like, "Oh, that doesn't happen." I was like, "That's not a thing, somebody wouldn't do that." And then we were sitting in the doctor's surgery, and I think there was a thing on the wall that said about self-harm and suicide. And I had said to my mum, I said, "Do people actually, hurt themselves?" And my mum said to me, "Actually, yes, they do. And that's what happened to your cousin Callum." And then that was just kind of, it kind of came into my world, and, that's kind of been it ever since. And I don't think I really understood at the time, but I think after that it was kind of questions all over again because it was a new thing and I didn't really understand much about it. And I think I felt myself that I needed to know what this was, what it meant, why it happens. Not that you can really tell why it happens, but all those kind of things that I just didn't understand. I kind of knew myself that I needed to know from that day forward.
You say in your essay you think it must have taken a lot of courage on your mum's part. We often worry about the impact of what we tell our kids. I wondered if you thought it was the right thing to do at the right time, whether there was any sense now you're old enough to look back on it, whether you think it could have been done any differently. And this isn't any criticism of you, Sarah, none intended whatsoever. I'm just interested in, from what was a child's perspective, whether you think it could have played out differently.
I definitely think what my mum did was the right thing. I think, like I said in my essay, it took her a lot of courage to be able to do that. And I think kind of the way that I had opened up the window myself, it wasn't like she had said, had sat me down and said to me, "Oh, this had happened." I kind of, I guess in a way I queried about it, and, she kind of took that as a sign that, now might be the right time. And so I think I'll always be thankful that my mum did that, because I think the worst thing would have been for me not to know. And I think kind of what I've learned from it is that one way or another I would have found out anyway. And I think my mum would have rathered it to have come from her than me have heard it and then come and been like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" Or, been like, "What's this?" So I definitely think she did the right thing. And I think even though it's hard looking at a younger person's perspective, they need to know, I think. And I mean, it doesn't have to be immediately. My mum did the right thing in, letting me process that he was gone, then bringing in how it had happened. But I think for me, now I know the importance of knowing what has happened. Because my mum never lied to me. She told me, but she told me in her own way.
She was really persistent every day. Has the postmortem come back yet? More than once a day, every time I'd be on the phone, is that, do you know now? Why has Callum died? And I honestly, I'm not going to lie, I had no idea how I was going to. She was just a toddler when Dad went, so I didn't have to explain. I thought it was going to be something that I would explain to her when she was an adult, So I thought I had loads of time, and I didn't have a clue. And that day in the surgery, she was reading all the things. It was pre-COVID, of course, so the walls were full of posters, and she was reading them all out. And I could see it, the self-harm poster, and I thought, oh gosh, is she going to keep going? And she did. And I had my reservations, but I kind of thought, okay, it's now or possibly never. It's now or, I guess, like you just said, or that you were going to hear it or make your own mind up as to what happened. I think that would be even more worrying for me. So yeah, when she said, do people actually hurt themselves, Mum? I just said, yeah, it's really sad they do. And I explained that, people going into the doctor don't just go in for sore arms and legs, There's also stuff that goes on that you can't see. And I said, and we think that's what happened to Callum.
This is a difficult question because you don't know how you would have unfolded and grown up to the point you are now without having lost Callum. But I do wonder whether both of you think that it has steered Orlagh in a particular way or changed you, Orlagh. Maybe I'll come to you first on that, and then we'll see whether your mum thinks it's impacted. But do you think it's changed you as a person?
Definitely, yes. I think I can kind of reflect on that with the people around me, and knowing that people around me haven't experienced the same as I have. And I think sometimes other people's behaviours or just, the way they go about things, I find to be very different to what I would. And sometimes, I kind of, maybe they're in an insensitive way going about it, or, it's just not as mature. And I think definitely the whole kind of experience has shaped me to be somebody who's more empathetic, knows how to deal with things in a different way. And I feel like I'm definitely a lot more mature about certain things than, some of my peers would be. And I find it a lot easier to have discussions about things like this. Sometimes, people, you'll kind of come across a discussion or, you'll hear about somebody else having had a loss, and people around me don't really know what to say or what to do. And I think I've kind of learnt that, there's right things to say, but also there's no wrong thing to say, because even saying nothing is saying something in a way, because you're still there for somebody. And I think a lot of the people around me wouldn't understand that that's the case and find it harder to just be there for somebody in this kind of situation. So I think definitely it's made me kind of a different person to what I think I would be without having this experience.
She grew up really quickly. I can't imagine what it's like to grow up with a grieving family around you all the time, especially a suicide. I know loss is loss, but having 2 suicides now, there is 100% something way different about suicide. So to grow up when you're dealing with a lot of sad people, I guess you don't even really know the difference that you made for all of us, because she kept us going, because she was little and free, and it made everybody else smile. It gave them a purpose. And so as much as you had to grow up, as much as you helped us all, I'm not sorry for the way that she's turned out.
No, nor should you be.
But I am sorry that, she's had to feel all these things.
There's been 2 suicides in your family, very tragically. How has it impacted you as a mum and sister and all these other things?
I think it completely changed the person I am. I am not the person that I was. I do worry. Initially after Callum's words were very few, but he said, "Stay strong and stick together," in his note. And I took that quite literally. So I am the joker of the pack. So I took the role of cheering everyone up and contacting daily through the family, like WhatsApp group, which then got tiring for me, but I think everybody had probably had enough of me by that point. But it did its purpose, I hope it helped, in the beginning. But life for me going forward, as I say, I did start a training, and I feel so strongly about things now that I think that, all of my life's experiences, when you sit down, you just think, this can all, it can't be for nothing. I need to turn this round and use it to be able to help. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm working in mental health. Things are changing slowly. I'm working with the NHS as part of a psychosocial interventions for psychosis, where they have people with lived experience instead of just clinicians. So these tiny, tiny little bits of hope are what keep me going. However, Orlagh, she has a voice as well, and it happened to her. And it must have been horrific.
Yeah, I think just kind of, I hope by sharing it, it kind of, I guess in a way people will listen and kind of, understand that young people who have lost somebody in this way can actually suffer from it. And like my mum said, they do need to be heard, because although it might, I've lost my grandfather and my cousin, so, it's not my mum, it's not my dad, it's not my brother, but they're still my family member. So it's important that we're heard too, and that there's support for us too.
Well, Sarah, thank you, and Orlagh particularly, thank you, because you were the one who stepped forward and said, I think we should talk on the podcast. I'm really glad you did. I think hearing your words, hearing both of you share your experiences of the same tragedy, I think has been really powerful and really insightful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Marley, who's busy panting in the background.
I managed to stave off the tears just on the very end.
I was speaking to the remarkable Orlagh and Sara. Now, here's Shona with a few thoughts to take away. They were remarkable, I thought. What did you make of the conversation?
Likewise, yeah. And I feel so grateful to have listened to that conversation, to hear mother and daughter talking so openly about losing Callum and living with his loss. What stands out to me most is Orlagh, just 9 years old, working to make sense of what happened, and then Sarah's courageous conversation with her, updating her eventually on how Callum died by suicide. And knowing what and when to tell young people is incredibly challenging. What to say, when to say it. I found myself catching my breath as Orlagh shared about being at school and the boy in the lunch queue saying that Callum had hurt himself. I think that just illustrates how quickly news can spread, and particularly amongst young people, and how children can be cruel without necessarily understanding the impact that their words can have. And then sitting in the doctor's surgery, in a moment, Orlagh moved from not knowing about self-harm and suicide to knowing. And I think Sarah's following Orlagh's cue and trusting that she would be able to handle the truth, and indeed needed to know, was really helpful. As Orlagh shares, she'll always be thankful that her mum did it that way, because the worst thing would be for her not to know and to have learned another way, because she believes that she probably would have found out another way otherwise. Orlagh also commented on her mum's timing, and she said it doesn't have to happen immediately. Her mum let her know that he'd gone, and then later on brought in that the account of how it happened, or how he died. In Orlagh's words again, she said she didn't lie, she told me in her own way. So yeah, just a really helpful living example for us on how to talk to young people about losing a loved one to suicide. And then finally, just beautiful to hear that in the face of their tragic loss, Sarah and Orlagh are looking out for each other, and that we can hear that loving relationship, that mutual respect coming across. And yeah, what a gift that is to all of us. So thank you to them.
Huge thanks to Shona and all the team at Mikey's Line for the work they do. Don't forget, if you need someone to talk to or someone to help you, then you can text Mikey's Line on 07786 20 77 55, or you can contact them via Messenger, web chat or WhatsApp, and the number for WhatsApp is 01463 729 000. You can also go and visit them, of course, at The Hive, which is 4 Strothers Lane, Inverness, and they're open 7 days a week from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m, and all those details and links are in the show notes. Speaking of Suicide is funded by Mikey's Line. This episode was sponsored by McDonald's in the Community, and the platform is sponsored by Highland-based family firm D&D Paving Limited. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, or if you'd like to take part, do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Speaking of Suicide is produced by Adventurous Audio Limited.